Great. Okay.
Hi,
Hi, Dave.
hi, just got on. Sorry I'm
Fantastic.
late.
No, we're just getting started. So we have members from several regions here. We have Heidi from Wisconsin. We have Kristen from our Northern New England region, Tess from Philadelphia, and Teresa, I believe you're representing Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. Montana, sorry. And I know we were maybe expecting someone from Maryland. Who is actually going to represent her region, so someone that I have not actually spoken to. So, but Teresa, glad to have you, and I think I'll be seeing you in a little while as I'm going to be visiting Intermountain for a site visit in a couple of weeks. I'm very excited about that. Well, great. Well, welcome. We are excited to host our second topic in the Best Practice Sharing Series, the JSHS Regional and National Judging. We've heard many requests for support with recruitment and training and how to support regional judges, as well as questions around national judging standards and practices. And so these best practice sharing calls highlight the excellent work that's going on in all of our regions and is a time for us to share ideas, build networks, and provide support for each other. So we welcome all of you to participate by speaking if you have access to a mic, sharing. You can type in questions through the chat function, which many of you have already used this afternoon, and just asking as many questions and contributing by sharing your own best practices, thoughts, concerns, anything like that. And then we also want your feedback. So at the end of the session, if you have any thoughts and ideas of how we can develop this best practice sharing series and introduce more topics of interest for future best practice calls, please let us know. It's a new initiative for us, but we're really excited. We had a very positive response from our first one, so we're excited about this one today. So before I begin, I want to introduce Sarah Monroe. You've heard her voice a few minutes ago, but Sarah is our Director of Communications. Sarah, do you want to say a word?
Hi there. I'll keep my voice on mute, but I will be jumping in to answer any questions that people post in the chat box. So feel free to jump in, and I will interrupt Tina and Dave as best I can.
Great. And I believe Doris was joining the call, but I know she's had a busy day, so I'm not sure if she's on yet.
Hi.
Great.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Doris.
Hi. Welcome. Thank you for joining, and we appreciate your feedback, and so we can make sure that the judging process continues to be strong, and look forward to receiving your feedback today and over the coming year.
Great. Thanks, Doris. And Doris, please, as Director of JSHS, judging is a topic of great importance. It's essential to running our program and, to keeping it at the very high level and the respect that it has. So, Doris, please feel free to step in at any time to share your thoughts and your experience and information you want to make sure is clearly communicated to regions today. So today we invited Florida and Indiana regions to share and speak about judging practices and standards. Unfortunately, Christy Rodkin from our Florida region is unable to join us. She's fighting a stomach bug today. And so I think Doris and I will speak about some of the regional best practices that we're aware of and judging procedures at the regional level on her behalf. But we are thrilled to have our guest, Dr. Dave Grabowski, on call with us. Dave has spoken several times and said hello already. But Dave is a full professor of biology at St. Mary's of the Woods College in the Department of Sciences and Mathematics. He's been there for nearly 20 years and has served as department chair for over 6 years, stepping down this past spring. Dave has been the regional director of the Indiana region for the past 7 years, and he was a judge for the Indiana Regional when it was run through Indiana State University for a handful of years before the Indiana JSHS was moved to St. Mary of the Woods College. So he has a really long history with JSHS. Not only is he a regional director for Indiana, but he has played an integral role in helping us support the national JSHS symposia by being one of our chairs of national judging. So he and Doris work very closely throughout the year on establishing judging practices and policies, and then also in preparing our judges at the national level for judging the competitions. So we look to him for a lot of feedback and for helping us in that process. Dave is also a member of our Regional Directors Advisory Council, or RDAC. So again, he serves on that advisory board, which helps inform the national office and participates in decision making and in sharing feedback from regions and in helping us ensure that we're delivering a quality program. So Dave wears many hats, and we so appreciate what he does for JSHS and for our program. So Dave, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm glad to be here, and it sounds like an interesting list. Sometimes I'm not sure I'm worthy of all of what you state, but I do what I can, and I'm here to help.
So great. Well, I know as someone new to the national staff, will be my second year, but I just so much appreciated all of the guidance that you were able to give me as I learned what it was all about last year at my first national. So certainly I look to your experience, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to share today. So because Christy is not with us, I was going to start with a few things about the regional judging and best practices. And then, Dave, I'm going to turn to you to ask you to share your thoughts. You've been a judge at the regional level. You certainly understand what goes on at the regional level from a director's perspective as well. And then we'll also kind of slowly kind of bring in the national judging and how the two are aligned and how regions can kind of make sure that what they're doing at the regional level is appropriate, and also how how it fits in with how students will then be judged later on in the national if they are invited to move on. So again,
yeah, fantastic. Sounds great.
Great. These calls are meant to be interactive, so please, everyone, chat or come in as you need, and Sarah will be kind of monitoring that chat function for us. So let's see. Oop. Of course, now I can't get it to click. Great. So I think at the regional and at the national level, we look at similar objectives. And really, I know when Doris and I are talking, and I know with our Regional Directors Advisory Council as well, that that this program is about the students and their experience and encouraging them to pursue STEM research, STEM careers, a future in STEM. And we want them to learn from their participation in JSHS. So one of our main objectives, and this is all from what we state in our guidelines and information papers on our national website, but that our judging objectives are to ensure an equitable competition by selecting qualified judges and by communicating the rules of competition to both students and judges. We realize that in any competition of this nature, there are differences of opinion about the judge's interpretations, and that may happen, and that it's the policy of the sponsors of the JSHS program, so our tri-service sponsors, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, to support the interpretations and the final decisions of the judges' panels. We certainly do our best to provide them with training and the information that they need to understand their roles, to understand the JSHS program, and our mission. And then, though we really do trust that they will use their expertise and their knowledge, and kind of keep best interests in mind, and an unbiased perspective as they're reviewing and judging student projects. And we really do, try to adhere to that, and we support their final decisions. So we hope that you will kind of take this at your regional level as well, and do the same. A lot of regions sometimes ask, well, where do I go to look for judges? How, where can I go to invite or recruit them? Some of you may still be recruiting. I know that some regions are not hosting till the end of March. Others of you are, hosting in just a few weeks, and you may already have this all set up. But regions have their own recruitment strategies, kind of based on how long you've been at your host institution and kind of your own networks of people, and what's around in your community in terms of STEM personnel and STEM engagement. But from regions, we have learned that judges can come from all sorts of areas, and we like to see an experienced group of judges, but also one that's diverse, not only in terms of their level of experience, but also in terms of their background and also their areas of expertise. We find that having diversity in all senses in our judging panel provides a more comprehensive and fair evaluation system. And it also allows our students to network and gain exposure to a diverse group of individuals and a diverse set of opportunities in STEM. So not only thinking about kind of what your judges are doing, but how your students may interact with them and what they can learn from having judges or seeing these adults participating in the program can be very valuable. So some best practices that we've learned from regions, judges can come from lots of different areas of expertise in the local region, looking at your host university and sponsors, in academia, professors, graduate level students who are appropriate for judging, looking at local industries and organizations. Again, this is a tri-service sponsored program from the military, so reaching out to your military community, and we can always help with that by providing as many resources or connections as we can through our sponsors to get the military more involved, and judging is a great way to do that. And alumni, let's not forget students that have participated in JSHS in the past and have gone on to a career in STEM or graduate level work in STEM can also be really great judges. So creating strong relationships with university partners is a great way to tap into judges, and those can become a core of judges who come back year after year. So you get some experience, and those judges can then help you with newer judges who may volunteer once or twice. And some departments, start to get involved and then go on to establish an additional scholarship or an award. So really creating those relationships can lead to even more through judging. Undergraduate and some graduate students, and really, we want to be mindful that students, graduate level and students who are judging are experienced enough to be able to judge. Do they have that expertise? But we do have some regions who use undergraduate and graduate students to judge their non-competitive sessions. So some of our larger regions have competitive sessions and non-competitive sessions. And they use these non-competitive sessions more for some of the younger high school students, freshmen, sophomore, who are not quite ready for JSHS, but we want to capture their interest, so they have different levels of participation to get these students involved and to encourage them to come back next year with a more rigorous, in-depth project, and they use undergraduate and graduate students to judge, and then create an intentional time for their students to meet with these judges to get feedback. Which doesn't always happen in the competitive sessions, but in the non-competitive sessions, they've also designed a very thoughtful feedback system to provide an opportunity for growth for these younger students, which is wonderful. Like I said, connecting with alumni, and again, our office can always be used to help you locate those alumni and see if anyone might be in your area, but you may also keep databases or records of past participants and ways to connect with them. And it's great to have them come back. Students love to see that alumni have come back, and we're trying to create a much stronger alumni network at the regional and national level. And we also have regions that specifically target underrepresented STEM professionals to help better connect with their underrepresented students and to increase the number of participants from these underrepresented populations, and feel that by having adults, speakers, presenters, and judges from underrepresented populations, help provide a connection and a comfort level, to say, I've done this, you can do it too. And really connect well with students. So a couple of different ways to think about tapping into judges. And some ideas for helping to prepare judges. I know that once you have them, you need to inform them, specifically what is their role and what is the procedure. The more information you can give judges ahead of time, I think the better prepared and the better able they will be to judge and to judge effectively. So we encourage regions to make sure that once you secure judges, that you're providing ongoing communication and support to say, especially for newer judges, this is what it looks like. This is what you can expect. This is how the session is set up. This is what we're asking you to do. Many regions, and we also do this at the national level, but provide papers and abstracts to judges in advance, 1 to 2 weeks in advance of the competition, so that judges can review the papers and they're familiar with projects, so that they have an idea of what they're going to see when, especially in the oral presentations, students are speaking and presenting their project oral. They have that background information. And I know, Dave, you might be able to speak about this a little bit, but I know a best practice that you've used is using judging mentors. So connecting some of your veteran judges with judges who may be judging for just the first time.
Yes, actually, we do that quite a bit.
Great.
I can get into that now or later if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a minute in just a second, so I'll just go through a few more things, but I know that you were going to talk about that a little bit, but just kind of an example is great, so we're looking forward to hearing about that. Some regions also offer trainings. Either they do a webinar in advance, kind of like the ones that we've been giving from our national office on various topics to you all. You could give a webinar, which judges can access, in real time, or can access online at their convenience, or an on-site orientation to help them with the criteria, the practices, the setup, the timing, particularly in the oral sessions, which are timed, how that is supposed to go, can help judges feel at ease so they can really focus on the material being presented when they're actually at the session. And again, giving them an advance look at the score sheet. If you use a score sheet or have ranking criteria at your regional level, letting judges see that in advance so they have time to process it, get familiar with what they're going to be looking for, so they can read the papers kind of with those questions in mind, but also kind of go into an oral or poster session with it in mind what they're looking for. And judging roles, making sure that judges feel comfortable knowing what their role is. What does it mean to be a judge in your region? What are they expected to do? Are they expected to review and evaluate projects in advance, and how far in advance? We ask that's something that they're doing either in advance, but certainly while they're in the session, that they're careful and they're evaluating everyone on an equal level. Providing intentional ranking on defined criteria, and you as regions define that criteria. We have regional and national criteria, which you're welcome to use, but we know that some regions may have differ slightly in that, but we do have kind of our national policies, which many regions adopt at the regional level. We also encourage judges to ask thoughtful and appropriate questions to students in the appropriate questioning period following the oral sessions or during poster sessions, and that they are able to have a time and place set aside to deliberate and discuss with an open mind, when determining finalists and when selecting award winners. Often that happens kind of behind the scenes, following the presentations while the students are off doing other things. And often I know that in the regions that I have seen on site visits, those deliberations are facilitated by a regional staff member. Certainly the staff member didn't see all the presentations, but at least that person is there to kind of answer questions when judges have them about how they can, because it can be hard, as some judges may see one category of competition and others are looking at other categories. They don't necessarily see all of the students. So it's hard to kind of, in the end, come up with your first, second, third, fourth, fifth place winners when you haven't seen everybody and you're relying on kind of another team of judges. So a facilitator sometimes can help guide that process. Great. And the big thing I know that's so important in our national office is that we encourage judges and remind them to be student-centered. Not all of our judges come from an educated, a background of education. Some of them are not familiar with working with 16, 17, 18-year-old students, or that age group. And so sometimes you may find that you want to or need to provide a little bit of training just on how to communicate, or reminding your judges that, that this is about the students, and that, the questions that they ask, keep in mind that the person that did this project might be 17 years old. And what does that mean? Is your question really appropriate? Certainly we want to ask rigorous questions and push our students, and to make sure that we're clear on what they presented, but also to make sure that the question is not meant to set them up in any way or to stump them, but it's really to provide clarification or to go a little bit deeper and push the student to go a little bit deeper. Some regions do ask judges to provide feedback to students, others may not, so based on your region, but making sure that judges are prepared and able to provide constructive and specific feedback that will be well received but provide growth. Feedback does not necessarily have to be positive. In fact, we all learn from mistakes. We learn from from failure, but making sure that things have a positive spin and that it's encouraging, and doesn't make a student feel, that they're never going to make it in STEM and that they should give up. Again, we want to encourage them to continue their studies in STEM and to continue their careers and their paths that way. So these are some judging criteria posted on our website at the national and regional level. You can look at them on our website, but just so you can get an idea of things that we're asking judges to look at when looking at projects. The statement and the identification of the problem, the scientific thought, creativity, innovation, and the appropriate length that went into the project. The design and procedures, Was the conclusion logical to the research problem? What was learned? Did students organize contribution to the field? Their skill in communicating results, and certainly did they provide appropriate and necessary references and citations? Great. So, so Dave, I think I'm going to turn it over to you a little bit now, and then certainly we can get into some national judging as well. But that's just an overview and some things that we've seen going on in regions that we really like, and ideas that we thought might be helpful to other regions who are, looking at how to, improve their judging practices or just build upon what they already have.
Sure.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave,
yes,
this is Doris. Could I make a
Yeah.
comment while we're looking at the judging criteria? Dave and members of the Regional Directors Advisory Committee, we looked at the judging criteria with concern of how you're looking at highly mentored projects against students who may not have had as many opportunities for mentorship. So we were looking at the question of creativity. And Dave, I don't want to go too deep there. You may have some comments on that. And it's a difficult criteria to measure. But I just wanted to tell you what our overall thinking was. And in establishing the judging criteria, our judges are tracking the students' methodology and their understanding of the scientific method. But we're looking for more than just following the procedures and answering the question under study. We're also looking for the students' depth of understanding about the research that was undertaken and how their work contributed to what is known about the area under study. In looking at creativity, sometimes students may not have, may have a new way of questioning or looking at a problem. We recognize that some of the STEM projects are not necessarily new, and they don't have to be completely new. That's what science is about. But again, we're looking at what if the student has actually contributed more to what is known about the research under study. So I just wanted to remind you of our overall thinking that goes beyond behind the judging criteria. Dave, thank you for letting me interrupt you.
Sure.
And I just wanted to tell everyone about our frame of reference and what we're looking for overall. So thanks, Dave, for giving me that
Sure.
moment.
That's fine.
And correct me if I've misrepresented anything.
No, actually, I'm just crossing off some things from my list of things I wanted to point out, and that's fine. We'll probably reiterate these because this can be a challenge for particularly new people, either as regional directors or as new judges come in to try and help explain or express what the philosophy of JSHS is with regard to where we're going with the students. I'm going to steal a phrase from Dan Wolf, my predecessor and longtime member of JSHS. One of the things he presents either to the whole group on the evening orientation portion for judging or to the judges that we have is make sure they have fun. And we're not talking about climbing on monkey bars and water pistols and whatnot, but we want to make sure that this is a positive experience for the students, that no matter what they've done, that they have some sense of accomplishment and that there's a sense that they want to continue with what they're working on. And I think all of our criteria and our training tries to go to that support of the students, having them move forward in the STEM areas. Doris, I hope that kind of
Yes.
encompassed what you were saying as well. We have to have criterion and rules, and looking at the slide that's up now, this judging criterion, the couple of points I'd like to add to that would be a lot of this is incorporated into the national score sheet that's available on the site. And I, for one, was introduced to that when I was a judge 12, 14 years ago at Indiana State University as I was coming in, and I found that to be a tremendous rubric to follow with regard to what I'm supposed to pay attention to as I was becoming a new judge, and what I've been able to build upon as I've been a judge in some sense or form over these last 10, 12 years. So keeping in mind that we want them to grow and that we are looking really for potential in the students, one of the things we tell our national judges is that we're not looking for perfection. And to piggyback on what Tina was saying, these are teenagers. As bright and advanced and genius-like as they are, their information and presentation may remind us of where we are in our careers after 10 or 20 years. They are still just beginning. So it's important for judges to have this sense of support and demeanor of growth for the students, not kind of a, well, you didn't quite make it. And we certainly don't want that to come through. So in following the rubric and helps put some numerical values and some empiricism to the judging process, and that always helps any new judges get a sense of what they should be looking for. With regard to what Doris was saying on the scientific thought creativity, as I said, we're looking for potential. Often with our national judges, we try and draw from the military as much as we can since they are supporting the program. In our training with them at nationals, we have to remind them again that they are 16 and 17. We're not looking for perfection, and we're also not looking for any direct application of their project to anything they may be working on or something that may serve the military directly. We are looking for the minds with the potential to open up new avenues to extend, expand, and advance STEM for themselves as well as science in general. I hope that makes sense. Anyone? To move forward, I'd like to cover what we've done in the Indiana Regional in years past. I was brought in a few years after I had moved here, about 15 years ago. I moved about 20, was brought in as a new PhD to JSHS. We typically try to bring in faculty that are either fresh out of their graduate work, so they are fully aware of what doing that type of work is, having done their defense, get a sense of how to present, etc. Or we bring in people that have been involved in some type of student development in academia, as it was pointed out. When we do get into these other areas, such as the industry, we want to make sure, again, that those are people that are not looking for that direct application. We try and bring in folks from all of these areas, if at all possible. And I know for the Indiana Regional, we are somewhat lucky to have Crane Surface Warfare Naval Station here in the state of Indiana. And I encourage anyone that might be near any type of military base, particularly those that are involved in STEM, to reach out to their network to find folks from those areas who have either had the experience or would like to become involved in the experience in the judging process for the various regions. I know for Indiana, we have used someone who's in the Naval Reserves. He actually serves 2 other JSHS regions, so he's been well seasoned, well experienced in doing this at a number of different places, so that also helps, as he is one of our mentors. Some other folks that another area that I draw from for Indiana region are judges that would be involved in some of our competition in the state Olympiad, judges from Intel and ICEF, from the regional science fairs that may occur in your states or regions. Those are folks that are typically dedicated to supporting young minds and students, supportive of students' efforts as they take on their own research, and they have a unique understanding and recognition of the very problem that Doris was bringing forward. Those that are really doing the work, in our case, typically out of their barn, on their farm, or at an R1 institution. How does one go about determining who did what work? And by looking at the criterion and having the papers in advance and going through our rubric, judges typically can come up with questions that help get deeper than just the subject matter and determine what ownership the students have for the project. It's very, I don't want to step on anyone's toes or talk down to anyone, but I think it's obvious when students walk into an R1 institution and become a worker for an R1 research lab, they can very easily take on a portion of the project, get into a protocol, and generate a lot of data. But I'm not sure how much of that they're actually generating on their own. Whereas the individual who may be more of the homegrown has to maybe work from some suggestions of those R1 institutions, but end up developing a lot of the paths and ways to overcome any challenges they have more on their own. It may not be as elegant or data-filled project that they have homegrown versus being at the R1 institution, but when we look at our criterion, I think we start coming to see more again that potential of the student as opposed to the wow and pizzazz of the actual project. So we bring in those judges from these other competitions, judges from the military, and certainly our own homegrown judges, those who are in our department. Now, we're at a relatively small institution. I'm at the Department of Sciences and Mathematics, so we pretty much cover everything. How that helps me is I typically have the opportunity to draw in a chemist, an ecologist, a biochemist, and a mathematician. And from those perspectives, we typically cover all of the categories of the competition, covering the generally 8 categories that we have, from math to physical sciences, chemistry, biomedical sciences, life sciences, because between the 5 or 6 of us here in the department, we're all covering those courses in one way, shape, or form. So in our small panel of judges, where we may only have 4 or 5 for our entire region, all of those 4 or 5 judges are actually seeing all of the 18 to 24 oral presentations, so their deliberations are a little bit easier, having seen every presentation. So they go through their morning session, they have some deliberation, there's an afternoon session, they have more deliberation, there's the following morning session, and that's pretty much the culmination. And that way, through their 3 deliberation and through the final deliberation, they can pretty much put together a hierarchy of the presentations and determine among themselves from their different disciplines where they believe the students actually get ranked. Now, I know at some of the larger regions, they actually have 50, 60, 80 judges that might be there, with as many as 6, 8, or 10 per session or category, and each of those will generate 1 or 2 or 3 finalists, and those all come to a final day of competition. So we can see that there's a wide range of how the finalists from the regions are actually generated. But I think one thing that's important is to make sure that at some point, the judges making the final decisions have some connection to and experience with the students that they're selecting for the final 5 positions, particularly the top 2 that are coming from a region to nationals. As far as the overlap that Tina was talking about earlier, we do have some turnover, or have had some in our department. We've had some judges who have simply gone into retirement and decided they no longer wanted to participate, at least as judges. but we typically try to keep at least one or two, if not three of our judges over as many years as they'd like to stay. And when we bring in new folks, it's typically just a few at a time, so that our ratio is pretty much more experienced than new judges all at one time. With regard to how we prepare our judges for the regions, I certainly direct them, as I do all of our participating schools and individual students, to the national JSHS.org site, where they can get most of the information off of that site, because we as a region follow as much as we can, if not to the letter of the law, all of the policies, criterion, tasks, challenges that come through the national JSHS office. That makes it easier for our region, because we can say it's posted that way, that's what we follow, and there's no chance for ambiguity as to how things are interpreted. How your own region may do this may be a challenge based on the traditions and history of a particular region, but I found it easier for us and for others that have started to adopt this philosophy if we're all on the same page and all following the same criterion and score sheets or facsimiles thereof. We don't get a lot of surprises then at the national level and say, well, but at region we do it this way. And as Tina said, the bottom line, the way the judges are going to be trained and oriented and prepared for the national judging, that's going to have the final say, the final decisions. So we really would like to avoid setting up the students with one set of criterion or way of thinking or philosophy at regions, and then they run into something else at the national level. So there's some of the rationale behind why we try to follow as much of the descriptions and philosophy from the national office as possible.
Great, thanks, Dave.
I guess one other part was going to the getting the papers and the abstracts out as early as possible certainly helps, and along with the scoring sheet, really helps the judges prior to even seeing the oral presentations come up with any questions that they might have to help them get some questions asked and answered to help them decide how much is this ownership of the student. Often during the oral presentation, which is the final piece that the judges are actually judging, not the abstract or the paper itself, but the final piece, the major piece that they are trying to judge would be the oral presentation. And it may come about that a lot of their questions are answered through that process, but if in fact they are not, now they have some built-in questions ready to go for each student. And that brings me to another point that Dan has reminded me of, that every student should get at least one question from every judge on the panel that they present to. We want to make sure that the students feel as though they were listened to, that they were engaged in some way with the judges, even if it's a simple question of how did you come up with this idea. There's got to be a connection between the judges and the students that helps them realize that what they're doing is of some importance.
That's a great point, Dave.
I'm going to kind of let it go at that for right now. But if you want to get into some other things that about national, I can do that, or we can answer some questions.
Let's see if we have questions right now. I think I just saw something come up through the chat, but I'm not sure. Sarah, are you seeing anything?
It was me adding to the chat, actually.
Okay.
I haven't seen any questions pop up yet.
Okay. Great. We'll give just a minute as people may be typing, so it's not always, does not always come across instantaneously. Doris, do you have anything else to add or share at this point?
No, I think Dave and you, Tina, did a great job in reviewing the overall philosophy and criteria, the composition of the judging team. I guess I would point out that many of the regions have a judging chair, which is helpful in the process if you have a faculty member who has been involved and engaged with JSHS for many years, you may consider talking to that faculty member about supervising the judging process, somewhat of a separation of duties from being the regional director. I think most of our regions, in fact, the majority of our regions are led by faculty members. What's important, Dan Wolf, who Dave mentioned, he always said that in his position as department chair, that he had lots of friends in the university, and he leveraged his role and responsibilities at the university to recruit judges across all colleges and departments of science. So I think the organizational structure of JSHS allows for us to have a strong judging presence. We have received evaluations from the assessment team that reviews JSHS and other STEM outreach programs of the Army. They would like to see us in the future provide more feedback to students. Feedback in written form is very difficult to accomplish, but I think it is something that we need to work on in the future, and hopefully we will talk about that at our annual meeting of regional directors at National this year, and perhaps form a committee on how we can develop some sort of process to provide feedback to the students.
One thing. Jump in for a minute, Doris?
Yeah.
Dave, I want to clarify something with regard to feedback and interaction between the presenters and the judges. I don't know how some regions do this, but as a general rule, judges are not to interact with any of the presenters or parents or teachers while deliberations are going on during the actual symposia. A lot of that interaction and for feedback should come well after decisions are made. We've run into problems at the national level. I know we've had some at the regional level when well, I'll just say it, as an aggressive mentor / parent might come forward and they don't understand all of what happens behind the scenes and how the judges are prepared for the process. They just think their little darling did the greatest job relative to what else they saw, and there's no reason their little darling should have been higher or lower or didn't win. We want to make sure that the judges are protected as much as the students are protected, and that is that when we do work on this issue of feedback, it may not be immediate, and it's certainly not going to be before decisions were made as to who won what position or scholarship at the regions or at nationals.
Right. Thanks, Dave. And
well said, Dave. I just want to add one more thing about feedback. When we have tried it in the past at national, and it is very important that that feedback is monitored by, for instance, at national, I would need to monitor that because, again, our judges are scientists and engineers, they're not educators. And so we need to prevent the feedback in a constructive way. So as Dave pointed out, that feedback would have to come after national or after your region and be well screened. But it's something to work on in the future.
And I just want to make sure that I was clear. I know that I had mentioned kind of earlier in the discussion that some regions do have undergrad and graduate level researchers who are giving feedback to students in the symposium. But I just wanted to remind you that's in non-competitive sessions. So those students are, although they're being judged, they're kind of in a I always refer to it, I'm athletic minded, but like a JV type of program and not the varsity level. The whole point of their participation is to learn and grow so that they can participate as a junior or a senior, when they're more ready. And so they are given feedback during the symposia as part of the program that they're in so that they can learn and see, what they can do better, how they can expand their project, where they need to improve or put more focus in doing their next project or in taking this project to the next level. So I just wanted to be clear on that. So far, we really don't, we are working at the regional and national level on the best way to provide feedback to those in the competitive sessions, and certainly would love feedback on that from what regions are thinking. And as Doris mentioned, we hope to discuss this at our annual regional directors meeting this spring, and see if we can get a committee or someone to, a group that we can look very intentionally at this question, because I think it's something that would certainly empower students and help our program move forward, and something that our sponsors are looking for and that we've been asked to do by students and others. So, but just to make it clear, the feedback that is happening now is in non-competitive sessions.
Sure. One other thing that I would bring up too is the feedback or the desire to connect with the student presenters, be it at regional or at national. This is probably more important at national. What we do when judges ask, how can I get connected with the student? Depending on the region or the state that you're in, there may be some challenges, if not full blocks, to reaching out and connecting with a teenager at a high school. So typically we would want, if in fact a judge wanted to further communicate with a student, it typically would run through the regional director. If it's at the national level, again, as Doris said, we would probably have that processed through the JSHS office. I know that I've seen this. I'm not sure, we may have to discuss this a little bit, that business cards are sometimes handed to students from the judges so that there can be some communication afterwards. But I just want people to be aware of the fact that there's feedback, and then there's also the concept of connection to possibly offer positions in labs or to do further encouragement of a student's particular project.
Great. Thank you. So I just want to be mindful of the time. Certainly, able to stay on a little bit longer if people have questions, but I also want to be respectful of everyone's busy schedules. So Dave, I really appreciate your input, your expertise, your experience in sharing what you've done as a judge at your region and then also at the national level. And certainly, Doris, your insightful comments too about the philosophy and the purpose behind our program and where these judging criteria originated and how they've come to be as they are now. And certainly welcome any comments or questions, but also want to make sure that we are kind of slowly wrapping things up in the interest of time for everyone.
I guess, Tina, I want to leave the question out there.
Sure.
If anyone has any recommendations for what resources and materials are offered through the JSHS website, you think about it and email us or pick up the phone.
Yes,
we appreciate your feedback, definitely.
Great. I did see. Let me see.
We don't have any questions yet. Doesn't look like anyone's dropped off, though.
Okay, great. Well, we will kind of end the call, but if a chat comes in, or please let us know. Dave, I don't know, but would you be open if there are future questions or after participants have had time to kind of process or think if something comes up? Would you mind being contacted? Would you like contact to come through our office directly to you?
Either way is fine. Some of the questions I may be able to answer, or very quickly. It may be a simple clarification. If it's anything that's even above my pay scale as the coordinator of national judging, I'll certainly rebound it back through JSHS out by you guys. But yeah, if anyone does have a question or a concern or hearsay or rumors or whatever might come up, if you want a clarification, feel free, contact me. Email is probably best. That's through the regional site on our national site. Get that through me there.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you all for being a part of today's call. I hope that you learned something. I hope that maybe you gained a best practice that you may implement, or something that you can put into practice at your own region. We look forward to having you all present a best practice at some point, but particularly appreciate, Dave, your time and effort in what you're doing for the regional and the national JSHS programs, and your time today.